Welcome to Pastorpedia. On a tough subject today. You won't like it, a couple of you, but it's important. I'm Knute Larson. We're with Pastorpedia, which is about all sorts of things of pastoring. I'm with Jeff Bogue and Jim Brown, talking about, is a church restart possible or good? Is it better than death? What about churches that are really in trouble? Is it possible? Who would ever admit the need? Jeff, is it possible to restart?
It's absolutely possible. We've done this many times at Grace Church, so it's absolutely possible. It is painful. It is difficult. And the owners of the church that needs restarted must surrender. They must give those things over to the Lord so that the new things can be done and be done quickly. But it is very possible to do it. I've seen it many times with my own eyes, been a part of it.
And I think when the church becomes aware of it, I'll speak from a little bit of experience. When I went to GOSHEN 25 years ago, it was a church that I would say was dwindling, dying. But when I met with the people that were there were 60 of them, 2 kids, by the way, and our kids doubled the children's ministry. When I went there, they said this statement that still sticks with me. We are a church that, I wrote it down here, we want to get somewhere, but we don't know how to get there. Can you help us get there? To me, that was an indicator that they were willing, they had an acute awareness that they were struggling, but they wanted to continue to reach a community. So we started from there, and by God's grace, we made an impact.
Now that's amazing that they said that. Would they have called it even a restart?
They didn't call it a restart, but in my mind, I knew it was.
Okay.
Yes.
Are there people that can help, outside help? There are some churches that are going to die this year. The statistics are terrible, are just sad. Are there outside groups that can help, or larger churches that are doing it well?
There are all those things. There's people like Knute Larson. There's people like Momentum Ministry Partners. There's people like Grace Church, Goshen Church. Sometimes the bigger churches in the area will adopt or work with the struggling church in a different way. But hear me. None of that is possible until the people, the ownership stake people within the church, whether it's the pastor or the remaining board members, until they admit that it's necessary. So what I would really encourage you to do, if you think of yourself in this category, is I would run a bit of an analysis. And I would look and I would ask questions like this. If your nurseries are empty, you're in trouble. If you don't have a youth group anymore, all those kids grew up, you're in trouble. If your baptism is dusty and it's become a storage unit instead of a baptistry, you're in trouble. If the church does not reflect the community, if everybody's driving in from the outside, you're in trouble. If the community doesn't even know the church exists, you're in trouble. So you have to ask those questions, and I like that the statement, facts are our friends. You have to answer those honestly. It's not because people don't care about God anymore, and it's not because you're the only group that... It's because that's the reality of it. And if you will come to that reality, then these outside voices become very, very helpful. If that outside voice comes in and they're trying to tell you something you don't want to hear, then everybody's kind of wasting their time in that moment if you won't receive the counsel.
Sometimes we have a tendency to think that restarts only start with small churches too.
That's right.
Sometimes I need to start with all level churches, and so one of the mantras that we have that we try to bring to our forefront, I tried it with our staff, is if our church building doors shut on Monday, and by the time Sunday rolled around, we rolled everything out. Rider trucks came in and moved everything out from our church. We moved out of the community on Monday. If by Sunday no one missed us or even knew that we left, then we are no longer relevant. We need a restart.
And I would add that a restart is needed if the board just spends its time arguing or talking about things that happened 50 years ago or remembering when the glory days. Who's out there to help? Every fellowship and denomination has somebody and a group that is good at this.
Yeah.
And make sure, I don't think this is rocket science, get wisdom from someone who's done it well. Everyone has advice. Advice is cheap, but wisdom is hard to find. So find someone who has navigated through, who has, we would say, whatever your qualifiers are for doing it well. Sit with them, pick their brains, sit down with them. What did you do? How did God come through? So make sure everyone has a system, but make sure someone else has experience too.
There are groups that Knute Larson does this, Momentum Ministry Partners does this. We do this. The main guy that does it with us is a guy named Ed Short. In the Charis Fellowship of Churches, there's the Assist group, and they do this. They help to think through restarts. There are also relationships that you might have. It might be a bigger church. It might be a younger church. But when you look in your own community, the churches that are being effective at reaching people, talking to them, picking their brains, even partnering up with them is something that God can really, really use. I think what happens a lot of times is churches die hard, and that's a good thing. They die hard.
It is.
And so usually what happens, it's not until you run out of money that you will say, we need a restart. If you can come to that conclusion, my nurseries are empty, my baptistry's empty, the community's not here, before the resources are burned, if you can give over or team up with those resources to start re-engaging the community, God can flourish and flourish very, very quickly. And I've witnessed this personally several times. As usually I'm the larger church, that smaller church will say, we still have money, we still have a building, how can we use it for the kingdom? And with their resources and our ideas and a unity of heart, we've relaunched many, many churches. It's difficult. Don't hear me like making light of how hard it is, but it's effective. And God starts to work again there, and those two things combined can create something very, very beautiful.
The challenge is that the people are aware of how the situation they're in is so dire.
We kid ourselves in church.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so somehow taking it to the people, maybe you paint a picture. Sometimes people can think along lines of business well. If you saw a business, and these were the numbers, they were bleeding red, and people no longer buy this product, or people no longer show up. In our minds, facts are easier to see, but paint a picture in a different way with your people, and then say, what would you do with that business if that was the model? And then say, you realize, it's kind of the Nathan principle, tell the story, let them see, then I would do this. So paint a different way.
So say more about that, both of you. How would a pastor explain it to his people? We're giving up?
No, you're reinvesting. So there's not a local church in the New Testament that's still open. And I think one of the things that needs to be a humbling point for every pastor is that God works in seasons. If the Lord does not return 500 years from now, nobody's going to know who Jeff Bogue is. That's why my job is to make Jesus famous, not Jeff famous. So there's seasons, and these resources, these people, this money, they are the Lord's. They're not mine, and they're not even the congregation's. They're the Lord's. If we can think about reinvesting, building off of legacies, replanting, so that the work of Christ is done, not the work of church so-and-so that's done, or pastor such and such is done. If I as a pastor can lead my people into that thinking and let them see the work of God, God has his hand and is working over there. Don't deceive myself with, well, we're faithful, we're holding the ground. Are we reaching the people? Are lives being changed? Is the word of God being proclaimed? Does the community care about it? If I can work in those ways, then what will happen is my work is amplified. I think of my mentor is a guy named Bob Combs. Bob is 81 years old now.
It's not that old.
It's pretty old. I mean, it's remarkably old, actually. But Bob is 81 years old. He gave his church, he gave his congregation, and he gave his resources to the next generation. His life's work is 10 times bigger than it was when he led it, because he didn't hoard it. And he gave it away, and he was a kingdom mindset. He's my hero. And I look at my team all the time, and I say, we're going to have to remember how our spiritual fathers acted when it's our time. And we want to give it away like it was given away then, so the kingdom of God is built.
I would say this too, just practically speaking, we have to be willing to have hard conversations with the ranchers in our churches, the people who give the big checks that might not want to make the change. We have to really be careful that we don't let them in some way influence what continues. If we believe the church is Jesus' church, then and the mission needs to continue, then we must be willing to say, we might lose this big giver, we might lose this influential person for the cause of Jesus Christ. Let's let Jesus supply. I think we have a tendency in those kind of settings, and when the church, we're trying to move forward, well, if we'll lose these people, the best thing that might happen to you is you lose some more of these people for the church to flourish after that.
If you find yourself saying, well, we're faithful, or we preach the word only, and these people don't understand that, it's time to call the doctor in, or to face some things that you haven't faced. Not every church should grow. We're just talking about, is a restart possible? And we're saying it is, and maybe outside help could be a big part of it. Thanks for thinking about it. It's a tough subject, but too many stats show churches dying and buildings standing empty. There are many ministries that might be able to help. Thank you for joining us. I'm Knute Larson. You're with Pastorpedia. Jim Brown, Jeff Bogue. Thank you. May God be with you today.